When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.
Guys, welcome back to Draftvice. My name is Walter, and on today's episode, we got another guest, a guest from another fan base, right? We're importing them now. We don't have him just in studio. It's not just me and Harry or me and DJ Intense. No, today we got Ryan Sullivan. You could follow him at Sports Rock, ROC, 2, because 1 was taken, and not having a number is just kind of lame. Although I don't have a number. So, but this guy's great. He's also, you could find his podcast, 585 Report Podcast with the Buffalo Fanatics. He's on the Twitterverse. Go ahead and check him out. Follow, subscribe, listen to him. And how's it going, Ryan?
It's going great. It's we got nice weather here. The schedule's coming out. We had a great conversation before we come on. I'm a teacher. We're getting close to the end of the school year here, so everything's looking up over here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm glad that you came on. Yeah, it was great. We were already rolling. We got it. We hit it off before. Like, we've never talked before, so we're introducing each other, and it's like, oh, this is kind of fun. It's like, wait a second, I haven't hit the record button yet. Hang on one second. We gotta get going. Hang on. And so yes, Ryan covers the Bills. The Bills, great team. I live in Jersey, man. So there's plenty of Bills fans near me. I just don't always see them. I know a lot of Jets fans, and I know plenty of Giants fans. I walk into them all the time. They're old, though. All the Giants fans are old. They're like 82. So Bills fans, it's kind of nice because it's like it's not really the area for Bills fans. Like, you guys are the upstate New York. You're really the only New York team.
Yeah.
That's why I don't follow the Jets or the Giants, because they play in Jersey, and I live in Jersey. I take offense to that. So I'd rather root for the Bills anyway. So welcome on, my friend. We've passed the draft. We're now. You're right. Schedule releases. I know you said you guys got your schedule. I'm still waiting for the Browns to fully release theirs. They're like, it's like we're getting it from other places. Like, the Packers release their schedule, so we find out like week 10 we're playing one team, and we find out like Christmas we're playing the Packers, and New England's whole schedule just got released at like 2:00 in the afternoon. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Well, that's what it ended up in Buffalo. We were getting piecemeal here and there, and then all of a sudden someone just dropped the entire schedule.
So much for secrecy. It was like somebody, well, because I know they released them to like some of the radio stations, and like there's probably some intern there being like, I don't care, man. I'm like, I got this job for 3 more weeks, and I moved back to Wisconsin. I have to go back to milking the cows and raising the chickens. So, but thanks again for coming on. How did you feel about the draft? Because like the draft is like, with the Bills, you guys had such a late pick this year. Last year, as you guys didn't have a first-round pick. Your first-round pick was Stephon Diggs, and that was a good first-round pick.
Yeah, I think it was for a lot of fans. It was such a, I don't know what the word. I think it was just such a weird moment for Bills fans, because picking at 30 and not really having a ton of holes, and just the way being drafted was super interesting. You know, this is a team. If you talk to the fan base, I think the place we wanted to get better was cornerback 2. Mm-hmm. But Bean is such and I think a lot of GMs are like this, is such a best player available guy that we went back-to-back edge rushers, which, if you consider it's a premium position, is wild, but it left a lot of people kind of upset, a lot of people frustrated, because we're still rolling in with not a great cornerback 2 on the other side, but it's...
You got Levi Wallace hanging there.
Got Levi Wallace hanging there, who is a roughly average cornerback 2, but, a lot of, Rousseau was a project. I think Basham might come in and be better as a high floor guy just because of what he is, but it was a super interesting draft just from the draft strategy and how some of that board shook out, because I'll tell you, sitting there at 30, and I'm sure you felt the same way when Newsome fell to you. I did not, when the board fell, I was praying that Newsome got past you guys.
I knew that wasn't happening. There was if you know who Nathan Segura is, he's like the most plugged in person with the Browns, and he kind of hinted that if Newsome was there, they were taking Newsome. I think he was like top on their board. Like, that was probably, of all the realistic guys, I think J.C. Horn, before he became unrealistic, was the guy who they were maybe targeting. And then like everybody realized J.C. Horn was actually pretty darn good. And then they went, well, he's not making a 26, so you guys got to find like the next best corner. And I think they really liked Newsome. So unfortunately, that's kind of how it went. But Rousseau, so I like aspects of Rousseau. I was not the highest Rousseau fan. I loved Basham. Basham was one of my favorite players to watch.
I wasn't a big Rousseau fan either. Like, to be honest, like I had a hard time falling in love with a pass rusher in this draft just because I thought it was every pass rusher was like, well, they're great, but you look at his tape and it's like he got 15 sacks not really knowing what he was doing.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of the impressive part.
I think the cool thing with so what he has is that length, and I actually watched Brandon Beane's interview, right? And he really focused on, listen, not everybody's going to win the same way. We might line him up at 3 tech a couple of times. He'll play like base D end, and that was what I found very weird about Basham and Rousseau was they were very like, oh, you guys are very similar design. They're not the same guy. Like Basham's shorter and like has a 4 inches loss of reach, but still not bad. He's just got that wide body, but then he's got the like not as long arms. But he's 280. Like literally, I was like, Basham is Rousseau in 2 years, kind of like when I was watching them, and I'm like, oh, so if Rousseau just ends up becoming Basham, that's kind of a cool thing. So I think there's a value in the double up, especially at positions of value, and there's still corners out there. You guys are connected with Steven Nelson, formerly of the Steelers, who got cut because they were like, well, we want to play Mike Hilton on the outside, and he was like, hasn't that been your slot corner for a while? Well, listen, Steven, you're going to be competing with Mike Hilton, and then Steven was like, dude, I don't want to compete with Mike Hilton. I've been good for you guys. So, and they were like, listen, you know what? We want to sign Juju back anyway. We'll cut you. It's like, Juju, the guy who does TikToks, the guy who made the Browns good by accident by going ahead and like annoying them. You dick.
Became a T-shirt.
Yeah, like literally, they made a billboard out of it. There's literally a billboard that said the Browns as the Browns. They're like all singing and dancing to that Corvette song. He put that song on the map by accident. But we're here to talk about the Bills, and I think but the thing is, I do like Rousseau. I like that combo, right? And not only that, AJ Epinesa, you guys took him last year in the 2nd round. It sounds like they think he's developing. They're kind of all similarly shaped to Mario Addison.
Yeah, they're all you go back and McDermott has a type of defensive end that he wants. He wants someone, who can reduce down on pass rushes. He wants someone who's preferably like 6'5", 6'6" type of guy. No, Basham comes in a little bit under that. But if you don't have versatility, and if you're not long arm, if you're not strong hand, McDermott probably doesn't want you. And and he also values rotation. Like none of the Bills' defensive ends ever play. Even Jerry Hughes, who's still producing at his age, doesn't play more than 60% of the snaps. So when you consider the way that they played, so if they pan out, you're rotating in 3 guys who, if they're productive, that's a scary thing. If you can keep rotating in fresh defensive end, fresh defensive end, fresh defensive end.
And Jerry Hughes is kind of the odd man out. I know he's kind of left over from previous regimes. He's been good for them, so it's not like. But you're right. Like they like to rotate defensive linemen. That was something Beane. I love watching Beane's pressers. By the way, it was funny because this time around, the starter for each presser, his face got more and more sad looking. Like he started out really happy. He's like, "We got Rousseau." And then he knew he drafted Basham, and he's like, I gotta tell everybody we drafted Basham and Rousseau, and everybody's looking at us like, why didn't you draft a corner? And it's like, but guys, I gotta draft like good players, and like Basham was like a top, like, and I think Basham really was very high on his list.
Well, the story was that they wanted to trade out, and that he was just at the board, and it was such a good value they couldn't ignore it.
Yeah, I caught that one too, and I was like, yeah, wait a second. I think that tells you something. And honestly, I think I know PFF liked Basham. I like Basham a lot. So I would have had Basham at least minimum top 50, maybe top. I don't know if I would have had him as a fringe first rounder. Probably close to that though. But again, it depends on how different teams' boards are built. So you look at it, you go, well, this guy's perfect for what we do. The other thing is their pass rush over the years. Even though Hughes has been great, they haven't been like the most. I guess, like, they're not usually considered, like, a top pass rush team. Like, Hughes has been great, but everybody else is kind of, like, okay.
Yeah, well, and it was a really weird year, and it's been one of the things that's just been kind of circulating the conversations on Bill's Twitter and just Bill's dialogue is they were, when you look at pass rush win rate, they were a top 5 pass rush win rate team, but a lot of that didn't translate into a lot of pressures and a lot of hurries and a lot of knockdowns and sacks and stuff like that. So I think I think there's a really good discussion to have around how much do pressures matter, how much do sack matters. And I think pressures matter a lot, but sacks also matter. Like, yes, getting pressure, but the way the game's being played, like, they're throwing the ball so quickly, like, you got to find ways to get home. And you saw the way that the Chiefs got beat was keeping Mahomes on the run, and that's the way Josh Allen got beat by the Chiefs, was they would just had him on the run all freaking day. So if you can find production at a premium position like that, like that's the key. And so many teams go back and forth. You coverage or pass rush. The Bills are very clearly in the camp that pass rush is more important than coverage.
Oh, I don't even know if it's necessary. I do agree with that's maybe part of it, but also it's just sometimes the value. Like, we're looking at that draft, right? And it's like corner outside of the top 4 guys. Who would be the next guy? Stokes, Asante Samuel. I don't think Stokes really fits their system.
No.
They want good zone corners. Trey White, the best part about Trey White is he actually really play both man and zone. I think Asante Samuel Jr. would have been the next best corner on that, like, for what they do, because he can kind of do both, and he could really do well in that scheme. But was he worth a first-round pick when you look at the guys who they also had on the board? You look at where I would have maybe taken him there, but I also understand where, like, he might, especially when you look at the athletic profile, they might be going, you know what, we'll take the shot on the pass rusher, maybe we'll get somebody down the line, because they probably also looked at day 2 and said, oh, there's a bunch of corners left. There's Paulson Adebo and Benjamin St. Juste and Ifeatu Melifonwu, who went really late. Like, not really, really late, but late day 2.
Well, 3rd round, yeah.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people thought he might be higher than that. So when they clearly have a specific build to what they want out of their corners. Safety is also, I think, maybe a higher value position for them than some other teams. There's some teams that look at safety like, oh, that's like a nothing thing sometimes. Like, that's like the 3rd or 4th most valuable position on their team. And I don't know about the Bills, like, right away when Bean went there, didn't he sign 2 safeties right out?
Well, that very first offseason, Bean didn't come in until after the draft. So McDermott came in and Whaley was still the GM, but they brought in Hyde and they brought in Poyer. But Poyer was a guy who you guys had originally, and he had that wicked neck injury as a Brown that ended up him becoming a Bill, and he just kind of blossomed into a really good, in the box covered safety that can do a lot. That's kind of a Swiss Army knife in McDermott's defense.
And that's something I think that comes back from even when he was in Carolina. There's a lot of good safeties and a lot of good linebackers. So I also just think that maybe they don't value corner itself super high, but it's the other coverage elements for them. Like, again, I think we'll get into maybe one of the more debated topics that we were I think the first conversation you and I had. We'll talk a little bit about those debates a little bit later. Maybe when people get further into the podcast, like, oh, we don't want to talk about this no more. They're getting on the political side of the spectrum. I get what's going on here. We'll talk about that later. We'll touch back more on the defense in a bit, but how'd you feel about Josh Allen coming along this year?
I think it was a lot. I think a lot of fans felt, I don't know, justified is right, but rectified in their support. And because I think you look at his 2019 tape or his 2019 box score, and it still wasn't great box score numbers, not great completion percentage, but if you watch this tape, he was significantly better in 2019, at least especially after that first Patriots game. That was like week 4 where he had like 4 interceptions and a half and then got a concussion, and he was back the next week but got hurt. And he was a significantly better quarterback. And it didn't always show up in the box score, but you could just see the way he was processing the game differently. And for him to come through and they added Diggs, but that's not, he had just adding a wide receiver is not going to make you better. Like, he significantly got better as a quarterback. And it's not very often, go back, even if you're not a Bills fan, watch his rookie tape and go back and watch. It's not very often you see the game be processed differently. You can watch him processing the game differently now than when he was as a rookie. And, it's just been super cool to see a team take a project like that and see it through, build the right way. Because I think so many teams are just A, impatient, or B, don't do it the right way. And it's just really cool to see him do it the right way. And you probably kind of feel the same way with Baker.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is just having the right scheme and going after the right players. And with the Bills, right? You guys went ahead. You guys got Cole Beasley and John Brown, then went ahead, traded for Stephon Diggs. And you got all these guys who got massive separation. Very good, Beasley good in the short area. You had, and in fact, that was one of the areas that Allen did better in 2019.
Yep.
And then his deep ball got better when they got Diggs in the room. And they're like, we got Diggs and Brown was kind of injured a little bit, I believe, this year, right? That was one of his problems. He's always kind of been injured for most of his career, but he was good there last year. Even like 2019, he was part of the resurgence. So they went ahead. They go ahead and get Diggs. Diggs being a whole different level of receiver. And again, Allen's first year, the real problem was the offensive line was not all that great either.
That's the other thing, yeah.
They had tore down some parts of it. They traded away Cordy Glenn. Dawkins looked good. And that was one of the guys that they, and they even extended Dawkins, right?
They extended him They extended him going into 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. So they get Dawkins in the room, and then they go ahead and they say, well, we need other guys, right? Dawkins a solid tackle, and they go ahead. They get Mitch Morrison, free agency, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs, and that was also part of that rebuild year 2019. They get Cole Beasley, they get the John Brown. And then, we saw development. I like that. And I think the sticking with him, and he got multiple years in the same system, same play caller. I think there's something to be said for that time in a system and putting the right pieces around the guy. Dak Prescott might even be the other argument for that, right? The guy who came in, had a good offensive line, had some solid receivers around him, was a 4th-round pick, and then ended up playing really well. And again, guys who maybe had some accuracy issues early on. I think the issue with Allen's accuracy issues, especially in college, were, he was playing with a lot of nobodies. He's kind of running around. He's got to chuck the ball. Yes, he had some accuracy issues coming out, and even like the short area accuracy was also issues he had some stuff with. But as we saw him develop, I thought that was great stuff that we got from him.
Well, and I think part of it with him too was I think there's going to be parts of this game you almost don't want to coach out. There's going to be parts like you don't want to take out his entire YOLO mentality. But I think part of what Dable had to do was be like, all right, you don't always have to chuck it 70 yards. You don't always have to run head first at the defensive end. You don't always you can take the check down. You can take the easy. You can take the dump off. You can take whatever. You don't always have to do that. I think that was the big thing. You can throw it away. It's fine. Throw it away, live another down. That's fine. I think that was a big part in his game this year was just that he understood and when he made a mistake, a lot of times he didn't compound the mistakes with more mistakes. Because I think the game that kind of got lodged in everyone's head from 2019 was that Texans game, the Texans playoff game, where he was running around like a maniac, trying to lateral the ball and So I think and he's a guy, you talk about the draft process and all the measurables and all the things that you want in tape and everything, drafting the right kind of guy matters. And he's a guy that you listen, everything that's written about him, you listen to him talk, he cares a lot about being good. And he cares a lot about he doesn't give a lot of bulletin board material, but you can tell he listens to the stuff that's written about him and said about him. And he cares a lot about being a good quarterback, and that kind of stuff matters. And that's why these interviews and stuff matter, that I think sometimes, even myself, I think I overlook the intangibles, but that stuff matters, especially at the quarterback position.
Well, yeah, we just went through that with the whole draft. Everybody talking about the quarterbacks, right? And you and I and everybody else doesn't get to meet any of these guys, right? So I do agree with you. I think that's one of those things you and I can't really always get the gleam in on until it's way too late. And what's going on between the ears, I look at what he went through his first year, right? Injury a little bit, a really bad offensive line. Baker did the same thing. Baker had kind of a similar situation in year 2 where they had a head coach that maybe shouldn't have been a head coach. Offensive line took a step back, guys who had injuries. So being able to fight through that, some of the stuff that we saw with, maybe Sam Darnold recuperates, but we don't always see that with every quarterback. Guys who are, we see the Jamarcus Russells of the world that just kind of totally fall out. I think that's the one thing that teams get the advantage of, and maybe that's why we see guys who fall. I don't know which guys are that guy and which guys aren't that guy. So, but I agree. I kind of think the mentality that Josh Allen has, especially comparing him to maybe Mitch Trubisky, a guy who just joined the locker room, right? His mental makeup at least from what I've gotten from the media, and again, I think sometimes the media overblows things. The stories get a little bit out there. Dealing with the competition aspect, like I don't think Josh Allen heard Trubisky came in the room and went, "Oh gosh darn, I got Mr. Trubisky here. God dang it again." I don't think he's worried. I actually think Trubisky went there because like when Dable gets his next head job, he's going to be like, "Yo, Trubisky, hop in the Miata with me. We're going cross country. We're going to be going to pick the team that we're going to." And
well, that's what Bean said. Bean was like, "Yeah, well, he's going to be gone after this year." Like that's the entire point. And if he can go out and go with Dable and get us some comp picks, awesome.
Yeah. That's the perfect combo, right? We got a comp pick for that guy. We got a comp pick for that guy. That's the new build. That's after you become a somewhat successful team. That's the thing you got to do, especially when you have a quarterback who's no longer on the rookie deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the next question for you guys, right? You guys have Josh Allen balled out this year, picked up the 5th-year option, him and Tremaine Edmonds. So the question's going to be extending those guys. I think Allen's probably a lot closer to the extension marker. I think especially you might want to get that done sooner rather than later. But I guess that might be the debate right now. Is it going to be sooner? I guess like from fan base's perspective.
I think there's a lot of people. I know I'm kind of in the minority on this. I won't be upset if they sign him now. Like I get it. I think if you can minimize that 5th year, it's probably a good thing to do. But also, in the same breath for me, and I think there's not a lot of the people who think like that, but there's a few that, even though I said all these things that he got better through years 1 and 2, he still only has 1 year of elite quarterback play. And, I don't know how similar that is to where you guys are with Baker right now, but, he has 1 year of elite quarterback play. Like, I want to know, like, what is the mean Josh Allen? Like, where is his average going to fall? Because you don't, because he's not going to be second in the MVP race every year. He's not. Like, that's not the way football works. You have ebbs and flows, and I would love to have just another year of data points. And if he has another stellar year, pay him $45 million, give him 10 years, fine, because we know. And so if they sign him now, I get it, but I also wouldn't be opposed to let it at least get into the season and make sure we have enough data to correctly value his contract.
I get that. I get both ends of it, right? Like because I think there's a lot of recency bias with the with Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, and that, oh my God, like look what happened with those guys, right? And I think the reverse end of that is, though, the Eagles got a 1st-round pick essentially, or close to it. They got a 2nd-rounder that can become a 1st-rounder for Carson Wentz. Jared Goff was thrown into a deal, sure, but at the end of the day, they got another quarterback out there, and that was really because they wanted Matt Stafford so badly. They were just willing to overpay for Matt Stafford partially. So I think at the end of the day, if you got the quarterback, and you got a guy who's got a top 10 potential and maybe can be top 5 like Josh Allen, if he's a wreck down the road, you'll get something for him. That's kind of always been my opinion with Baker too. It's you got this guy who, what you saw, the value you can get from extending them sooner, right? Getting him at $35 million, right? Can you get him down right now and say at a $35 million APY, right? Maybe cut down a little bit on the guaranteed money. Be able to take something out of that sooner rather than later in the extension. Does that get you enough down the line that, say, listen, like maybe he does crash and burn down the line, gets too many injuries, runs into somebody, pulls a Cam Newton, just gets arm injury, Andrew Luck. I don't think it's going to happen with Allen. You might sit there. He might never be what we saw with Andrew Luck, right? We saw last year, and that might be peak Josh Allen. But I still think it's probably 80% of what we saw of last year. As long as they have some guys around him who can catch the ball. Yep. Like even Aaron Rodgers needs somebody around him to catch the ball and needs people, to protect him. Same thing with Pat Mahomes. Same thing with everybody else who plays football. So as long as you know that guy has that range of talent, 2 years down the line, you can get rid of these guys a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think teams, I think you said it well. Teams are getting out of this. There's really an interesting paradigm shift this year that teams are getting out of this sunk cost mentality that they said bleep it. The Rams said bleep it. We'll eat this historic dead cap to get him out of here because we want to keep our window propped up as long as we can. The Eagles said bleep it. We're going to rebuild. We'll eat this historic dead cap to get Carson Wentz in and just start the heck over. So I think that teams look at that now and say, hey, we're fine eating a dead cap for a year. And like the Bills did that too in 2018, not with a quarterback, but in 2018 when they had Josh Allen and behind that garbage line and no receivers, that was a year they had, because 2017 they kind of won with kind of a mix of a bunch of Sean McDermott guys and Rex guys, and then they cleared house and had at that point was collectively a historic amount of dead cap, and they ate it. And then the next year they came in with all this money and they got Beasley and Feliciano and Brown and all these guys. So I think teams aren't looking at dead cap in the same way that maybe we used to.
Yeah, I think dead cap, what it ends up being is just a temporary thing. Like, look at the Saints. Saints are just like, dead cap? What the heck is dead cap? Yo, give us all the dead cap. We're going to walk it. Oh, yeah, we're going to extend that guy. We're going to extend that guy. We'll push this contract down the road. That's going to be a thing. Listen, there's going to be more teams doing that. And now also, you know, like with the new TV deals that they're coming up, they're making buku money. That's going to go up even more. So the real value is going to be if you can get these guys locked up before the buku money comes in, if you can really pull that off. Some of them might be smart enough and say, well, you know what? I'll wait till the buku money comes in. Y'all are going to pay me anyway. And if not, I'm going to bet on myself in free agency and I'll pull Kirk Cousins, get paid $50 million a year. And then they'll be like, God dang it, how'd that happen? So, I think I agree with you. I think there are you might want to look for data points more. I get that nervousness too. And I'm more sure on Baker than I am than a lot of people are. I just saw some of the throws by Baker and I went, he's got top 10 talent and he's showed some things that had more to that. Same thing with Josh Allen. And I was less sure on Josh Allen coming out. And I think a lot of people
I was too. There was a lot of Bills fans, like a lot of Bills fans on Twitter that are like, I always believed in Josh Allen. Probably screamed wrong. I screamed wrong, Josh, when we drafted him. Like, I admit it. But it's funny. There was a group chat that one of my friends actually pulled out for me. It was funny because I was in grad school at the time, and we were in a group chat, and I said, I go, wrong, Josh. And then I was like, bleep it. Josh Allen, best quarterback ever. And I hit him with the Undertaker gif coming out of the coffin. But like, there was a lot of reason. Like, Josh Allen's a mathematical anomaly. Like, there's no reason Josh Allen should have succeeded given the history of quarterbacks before him.
And I agree, because like if you think about it, before him it was like Blake Bortles, and that was what I think a lot of people were worried is he was going to be Blake Bortles. Somehow, in the cornucopia of all the stuff that went on around him, they found a way to get him more accurate. They found a way to get him to work. And I think part of that is the in-between-the-ears thing, right? Like being willing to work it, being willing to change it up, get a new QB coach, work with this guy, get the right coach around him in Dayball, get the offensive line there, get guys who can separate. They've been adjusting. I just like what the Bills have done so far.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I think the Browns, now that they have a good head coach, is the same thing. They have because it's just not about what I've learned, and I'm sure you kind of feel the same way with the Browns. It's not about spending money on big name free agents. It's about filling holes efficiently as possible. And you guys you guys got Wyatt Teller from us, who you fleeced from us for a 5th round pick. You got Beckham, but I mean, Jarvis Landry isn't even a ton of money, but he's doing what you need him to do.
We'll get into that politics debate. We're getting into the politics, the real politics of our teams, the Jarvis Landry and the Tremaine Edmonds debates. That's what really we bonded over. We had a nice little conversation on Twitter one day, folks, where everybody's like, "Oh, yeah," he's like, "Dude, like, what's worse talking about, politics or Tremaine Edmonds?" And I'm like, "Browns have the same problem, but his name is Jarvis Landry, man." And it's such a weird thing. And what we came to the conclusion of was, listen, our teams are so good, you can't complain about the GM, you can't complain about the head coach, and you can't even complain about the quarterback. So now we got to complain about one player because he might not fit a scheme or he might not perform to the contract. So
yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's the whole thing with Tremaine Edmonds. I think he's objectively, now there's people in the extremes on both sides of it, but I think most fans will agree he's a objectively decent linebacker, average linebacker, top 15 middle linebacker, who's got a ridiculously high ceiling. And I think is he worth what people's got up in arm? Is he worth the $12 million that it's going to pay him to cost him to keep that 5th year? Which I assume is probably a similar discussion with Jarvis Landry, I'm assuming.
Yes, there's been a huge debate with Jarvis Landry. So our debate with Jarvis Landry basically is there's been a couple of people who've been anti-Jarvis for the whole time. right? That like he's slow, he can't separate. And, this year he came off the hip injury. He has a $15 million cap hit. So this year and next year it's almost not entire, and none of it's guaranteed, so they can cut him right now. Wouldn't be any money. But you also look at it like, how do you get rid of a guy on your team who like has been one of the more consistent pieces to your team, especially offensively, where yes, they spend a lot of money on offense, and so there becomes a question of, does he fit the scheme? When they signed him, they played a lot more 11 personnel. Stefanski comes in, he loves tight ends. He's like, get me all the tight ends. Austin Hooper, Njoku, Harrison Bryant. We almost drafted Brevin Jordan in the 4th round. Look at everybody. All the tight ends. It's just like every tight end that ever existed, they will look into because they're like, well, we're the Browns. We like all the tight ends. We have a tight end fetish. That's what Stefanski's thing is. He was a safety in college, but man, does he like the tight end. Because they play a lot of tight ends, the position that Jarvis kind of is on the team, he's not one of the faster receivers, he's not a burner. So he kind of is a schematic not fit for 12 personnel, because what you want are guys who are going to stretch the field, get everything open for the tight ends and the running backs to be able to run after catch and be able to make plays in the middle of the field. That could lead to maybe some changes in the scheme this year, maybe some adaptation, right? Daboll loves playing with 10 personnel more recently, it sounds like. He's like, we'll go run 4 wide receivers. Take that shit. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the issue is when you talk about those guys like Landry and cutting him, like, yeah, you save whatever the money is you're saving, but here's the other issue. You also don't have him. Like, yes, you save the money, but also now you don't have the players. So I guess maybe that's an obvious point, but I think people kind of overlook that. Like, is the value you're saving worth the production that you could be losing? And I think the draft pick, I think my favorite draft picks of the whole draft was you guys going Anthony Schwartz, because I think that helps out Jarvis Landry tenfold, just because of the type of player he is. Even if he doesn't catch anything, he's going to force the field to stretch.
I love the Anthony Schwartz pick, and I might be one of the first. I was like one of the like, I know there's 3 or 4 people on the Twitterverse. I wasn't the first one on him in Brown's Twitter, but I was like, oh, I like this guy, and I knew they liked him too. So when it came down to the 3rd round, I'm like, they're taking him. So yes, I like the Anthony Schwartz pick. That guy's got speed for days. It's like light speed rescue with him.
Now, is there anyone in your, because I'm not plugged into Brown's Twitter, is there anyone, because I know Bill's Twitter would be like this, that's saying that this team is better without Odell Beckham? Because I feel like I feel like there'd be Bills fans saying that if they were in that position. Not that it's true, I'm just curious.
It's funny. It feels like that was a thing before the season and like during the season. And then I think people realize, I think specifically the guys on Twitter, because a lot of the Twitter guys for the Browns are people who watch film and the guys who cover the draft, and they're like, so they watch it and they look back and they go, oh wow, Odell was just separating freely for the first 6 weeks and Baker just didn't know the offense yet. So now we're kind of all excited for it. Now, if you go on Brown's Facebook, that's kind of a little bit more of like, like Facebook is in general, where it's Boomer Book, where they're not watching the tape. They're just like, Odell, like, it's get off my lawn territory. Get off my lawn, Odell. Stop proposing to the kicking net. We don't care that you could separate from Marlon Humphrey and William Jackson, and those guys are highly paid corners. We don't care that you're the only guy on the team who can break man coverage. Like, it's like, that's kind of how it is. I love Odell. I want him back. I can't wait to see him. He was exciting with the, especially if you watch the All-22, you go on NFL Game Pass and you go, oh my God, man, this can be sexy, man. If he gets back to like where he was separating with if he gets back from the ACL, and ACL's not as scary of an injury anymore, although we've had some guys take longer than others to come back from it. I kind of I think there could be something with the Odell thing. So I'm not of the, I think Twitter less so, Facebook, but Facebook tends to be the population of opinions of the older.
I feel like also people forget that the Browns you guys played like 3 games in a monsoon.
Yes.
And like people forget about that.
Forget about that. Forget about Odell. There were people who want to get rid of Baker this year. Like,
really?
we got to week 6 and they saw the Steelers game and people were like, oh, like there were people who cover the team who now act like they were always Baker supporters, who were talking about let's trade up and get like Trey Lance like halfway through the season, and then Baker all of a sudden after that Bengals game like turned it on when Super Saiyan like I figured out the offense, thank you. I didn't even have an off season. Can you relax? I was like watching people go like bananas. I'm like, we had lost Wyatt Teller. Like it was the Steelers game was I think what broke a lot of people for a minute or two, and like it was weird. We had 2 weeks. It was both the Ravens and the Steelers games, the first ones, where we would play the Bengals the following game, and it was weird because the time between the Bengals game and those first 2 games with the Steelers and the Ravens, I was like, I don't want to go on the internet anymore. I'm just done. I don't want to be around people. I want to be alone. Get to the Bengals game so we can look a little bit better. I get the Bengals suck, but just get to the Bengals. And I still went into those games so nervous. The second Bengals game, I was like week 2. I'm like, oh my God. And then I watched them beat them like crazy. I'm like, oh, this is nice. We won. We won a game, everybody. It was so weird after we got blown out week 1, which was like expected.
Well, it's funny how much narratives change over a season like that, because that was kind of the narrative on the Bills early year. It was their defense was bottom, and they were statistically for the first part of the year were bottom of the league defense. And it's just funny how narratives change and people forget what we're even talking about at the start of the year with some of this stuff. So it's funny that how much narratives change, and like within a year how people's opinion can change, and and also how sometimes people with blue check marks take themselves a little too seriously and like try to hide some of those. Like I have a lot of bad takes, and like if you follow me on Twitter, like I lean into my bad takes. Like I bookmark my own hot takes.
Not me. I've always been right, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. If you follow Draftvice, you know Walter's always right about everything. So. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, like we all have bad takes. Own it a little bit. You're right. Yes. I mean, like I'm trying to think of my worst take. I can't. Probably because I've always had good takes. So I'm just going back to I've always had good takes. I've just always been.
I mean, it was before I had Twitter, but I was till he was out of the league. I was always in on Ryan Mallett. I thought Ryan Mallett was going to be an elite quarterback. Like I was so in on him. Like who else was I in on?
That might be one of those guys who I really think it was a mental processing thing. It was like a locker room thing because he was kind of okay on the Texans.
Yeah, but he just wasn't. From everything I've heard, he's just not a smart guy. And if you're listening to this right now, I'm sorry. That's just what I think. I think he slept through a meeting when he was with the Texans, though. Like I think there was some stories like that. Like I heard he just wasn't the brightest guy. I think if you go and watch his Gruden quarterback camp, I think he was kind of aloof in that.
Yeah, but didn't Jared Goff not know where the sun rose on a given day? So like,
that's true.
So I don't know. Every quarterback's got like their flaws. I granted maybe his was more work ethic, but like I kind of get where like because he did have a lot of the arm talent. I remember he had that year. It was they were rotating between him and Brian Hoyer at certain points for the Texans, and that was for some reason they were better than Brock Osweiler. So, I mean, at least if I ever had the choice, I picked Mallett over Osweiler. It's not a big thing. I don't know who's debating this.
Well, I was the same thing. I went through a phase. I think a lot of people went through a phase. There was like tall quarterback, good. I was like, Brock Osweiler, 6'8". He's got to be amazing. And he very much wasn't.
Tall quarterback, good. I like that. That's just going to be like, that's going to they do the scouting notebook. Tall QB, good.
That was my thought. And that was part of the reason why I was out on Josh during the draft process. I was like, oh, well, now I went through. I was like, all good, tall quarterbacks will be good. And then there was a period of time where all tall quarterbacks. We had EJ Manuel, who was terrible, and then we had Tyrod, who was kind of okay. And I was like, oh, we can do short quarterbacks. And then that's why I liked Rosen coming out, and I liked Baker coming out, and I liked Darnold coming out. But it shows you that it's not that. It's a bunch of traits that make any player, not just quarterback.
Yeah, it's not just height. That's for damn sure. I actually feel like the taller you, like when you get to 6'6", 6'7", it's really weird. The 6'7" quarterbacks are the ones that seem to have a fall off. So it's like I think there's like maybe like there's a good medium zone. It's like the porridge from the Three Little Bears, three little one of those the nursery rhyme stories. Those things. We didn't come here for nursery rhymes, folks. I understand that. So I like where. By the way, I love McDermott. Like he's actually, I really like him as a head coach. I think he's one of the cooler guys that were like ever became a head coach. When I found out the Browns were like they chose Hugh Jackson over him, I went, oh really? Well, that set us off on a nice little 0-16 season.
Well, the story there wasn't it the story that your whole analytics department wanted him, or your whole
offense, D Podesta, the guy, everybody. We're like, yo, we want McDermott, and then like the owner was like, well, we're getting Hugh Jackson. It's like, but we wanted McDermott. It's like, well, we got McDermott at home. It's like, not that meme that hasn't even come out yet.
But I'll tell you, I really liked. I'll see. Here's an example of me being wrong. I wanted Hugh Jackson to be a Bills coach. I thought I was of the mindset. I was like, wow, Hugh Jackson went 8-8 with the Jason Campbell Raiders or whoever it was that he went with 8-8 with. I was like,
Pryor was there too. Terrell Pryor was there at some point.
Yeah.
There.
When he went 8-8 with the Raiders, he must be a great coach once he goes to a team that's not problematic. And clearly it didn't work out, but it shows you how once again people sometimes you never know with these coaches, and
that's one of those things where I think it's like another one of those things that we're not privy to. Like everybody was talking about like the head coaches that got jobs this year. I think it's one of those things that we're just not privy to. We don't know enough. Yep. We're not getting to interview them, so we're not hearing like what's your plan, Hugh. And then Hugh also, I think Hugh was one of the best offensive coordinators for a while. But It's not all about being an OC. And he was just kind of like, he was very much abdicate authority, like, I didn't do anything wrong. The players didn't do it right. I got to get back to the tape. Dude, it's Wednesday. We're playing the Steelers tomorrow.
Well, that's how, and that year you guys were on Hard Knocks wasn't really the kindest to him on. Like, he didn't paint himself in the best light all the time when he was on Hard Knocks.
Well, I felt bad for him that season, too, because at that point, they basically cut his balls off. Like, they said, you know what? Todd Haley's your offensive coordinator. It's like, I didn't ask for Todd Haley. We're getting Todd Haley. At this point, they went the other way around. Jimmy Haslam and John Dorsey were like, Hugh, like, you got to be that CEO, that mentality. We're going to have Todd Haley. And Todd Haley was basically trying to screw him. Like, not for nothing. I thought both were not good people to be in that room. I think they should have just fired him before that if they were going to do that to him. But that's what they did. They went ahead and forced Haley on him. That's what led to a really awkward start of the season. So, again, it's one of those things I think teams are learning how to evaluate people. That's why I thought Saleh was going to be a great head coach, because I thought, like, first off, that he was like one of the finalists for the Browns, and D Podesta has been calling it pretty well so far. So when he went to the Jets, I went, oh, this is going to be a good. Sorry about that. I'm sorry about saying Saleh's going to be a good head coach.
No, I think
you guys got a great one, and you already have the head start. Don't worry about it.
Well, I like all the head coaches in our division. Not besides, but I mean, Belichick's really good. There's three really good coaches, and like, I hate that I enjoy Brian Flores. Like, Brian Flores seems like a guy who legitimately has command of a locker room and knows what he's doing, and he's competent. And Saleh hasn't coached a game yet, but he seems like a guy who's competent. And it's weird kind of having that adult in the room now, and like, it just seems like. And you can see it in the players, and I wonder if you see the same things with the Browns, because you see just the way. Like, you can't always get a ton out of post-game locker room comments or post-practice locker room comments, but you pick up on stuff sometimes. And I think players legitimately feel heard and like want, and that's the kind of stuff that matters. And you hear, and like, I remember when Rex Ryan was the coach here, and you can go back and look at some of those comments and like, oh, they seem dejected, they seem annoyed, they seem like, no, like, players like objectively like enjoy playing for McDermott. And like, I don't think that's the case. Even on good teams, I don't think guys always like playing for a coach. Sometimes it just happens to be the coach, but I think guys legitimately like playing for McDermott. And it seems like you guys kind of have the same thing with Stefanski. I almost called him Stefanski, right?
Stefanski, yes. No, it's true. I think that's really a thing. And I think you're right. You can clearly see just how Rex Ryan handled some things. He signed Ike Empanali after he got waived by the Jets after punching Geno Smith in the face,
and then made him a captain against the Jets.
Yeah, like I get you're like kind of playing it up and trolling, but that was one of my bigger problems with Rex is he didn't know when he had to be the adult, and it's when they can't look up to you and be like, hey, you got to do your job. You got to be correct. Like, it's fun to have jokes and things like that, but like Stefanski's jokes are like dad jokes. Like, he's like, he did like the soup Nazi joke to Joe Woods the other day because they finally drafted an offensive player like in the 3rd round. He's like, no soup for you, Joe. Like, we got you enough defensive players. Relax. My player. Go home, Joe. Joe, stop. Like, things like that. Like, being quaint, kind of more like, but whereas like with Freddie Kitchens was wearing a shirt out that was like the Steelers started it, Browns finished it or something. Like 2 weeks after the whole thing with Myles Garrett, and I'm like, dude, you got to have some. People are gonna recognize you. You're in Cleveland. You're like, especially in Cleveland. Like, if you were in New York and you did that, like, I'm pretty sure most people would not recognize Robert Saleh. He'd look like one of the other 39 people that look like Robert Saleh in New York City. Like, he could probably get away with doing that. I don't think Saleh would. Same thing with McDermott. Again, another guy who, if he went to New York City or Boston, 39,000 people who look just like him, just like, oh, Bill Burr's here this week.
No, it's absolutely true, and there's a really funny clip, and if you go back and if you guys haven't seen it, there's a clip they did one of the Showtime turning points on the Bills Chargers game this year, and Josh Allen got a flag because he ran it in for a touchdown past I think it was Mike Willett, one of the Chargers cornerbacks, and literally like looked him in the eyes and spun it at his feet, and they flagged him for unsportsmanlike conduct. And so the clip cuts to him. The clip cuts to McDermott talking to the referee, like, "Hey, what'd he do?" And he goes, "He spun the ball at him." So McDermott goes over to Josh Allen on the bench, and he goes, "Listen, I'm just coming over to tell you, if you do that again, you got one. You're gonna get ejected." And as he's walking away, he's like, "But I like the swagger, damn it." And that was it. And that was it. And it's like cool stuff like that. And there was other, I love watching those things because sometimes you get a really cool insight into who they are as coaches.
Oh, yeah. The mic'd ups are always the best part, I feel like. There's always some guy that's mic'd, especially if it's a good player that's mic'd up. Like, you're talking about Wyatt Teller before. Man, he was one of my favorite people to hear on a microphone. The Steelers playoff game when the Browns beat them, and like there was like 5 interceptions, a fumble, and like Wyatt Teller's just walking around. I want them to extend Wyatt Teller so badly, and they probably won't do it. And I'm gonna be so sad that week when I find out he's going to free agency. But man, he is fun on the microphone. I'm like, dear God, can't we keep this guy, please? Andrew Berry, just do me one favor. You can sign anybody you want. Keep Jarvis, do that guy, get rid of Myles, keep Teller, please, because he's just. Dude, he's just got this such cool bravado, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. He's like, the Browns is the Browns, really? It's like just so intense, dude. I didn't know he was intense. I didn't know he was that like kind of cool, intense guy, but it was kind of fun. So I love watching that stuff too. I love like the insights and stuff like that. And that's why I watch all the every GM's presser for this, because like I get more insight. I learned a lot last year from watching Brandon Beane's presser, because I think he was talking about how they were using some apps so they could go ahead and get like UDFAs like signed quicker. Like it was some
really? I didn't even catch that. That's cool.
They were doing some kind of cool thing where they designed an app. I think it was Brandon Beane. I think it was Brandon Beane's presser, and they were using an app so that way, because they were all over the place. So they were like, here, we're in, like, I can greenlight when, like, what your offer is on this guy for this UDFA. And, like, that's why I love watching those things, because you find out, like, those little nuggets, or how a team has, like, a certain team-building mentality for a particular player. And, again, like, that's why, like, I get why they did some of the things they did this year, because, like, they even said they had a guy that they, that was in camp, that got injured, I think, was they have a cornerback. I'll pull him up.
Well, we have Dane Jackson, who was practice squad last year, who played a little bit. We had Cam Lewis, who was a slot corner, who actually came in for Taron Johnson, because Taron Johnson started off the season not well, came in for the Kansas City game, got hurt. The first Kansas City game got hurt, and then Taron Johnson went on a tear after that. But, they trust, and I think they hit a point in their team building now where there really is, this is kind of a finished unit. Like, there's not much more, and the Browns are probably heading to that point too, where there's not much more you can really add to this team. So the way, getting back to that time, culture, how you team build, the one thing the Bills really did the last couple years was paying their guys, and the Browns are going to get to that point now with, like you said, Wyatt Teller, and you guys paid Nick Chubb? Have you guys paid Myles Garrett yet?
Yeah, we paid him. They were like, "Yo, wait a second, he's coming up. We can sign him. Let's extend him now. He's gonna get really expensive in like 2 weeks. Go."
Yeah,
coming off a suspension, he's never gonna be cheaper, folks.
And like that, but like that's not like signing your guys. Like I forgot who I was listening to. It was a former Louis Riddick. I was listening to Louis Riddick on a podcast not too long ago. And like paying your own guys matter. Like when you draft someone or you get someone on the cheap and they ball out for you and you pay them that the correct way, you don't make them go through contract BS and whatnot. Like players see that and that matters and that helps your team. So when the Bills this year, when they re-signed Darrell Williams, who was a reclamation project. Then when they re-signed Feliciano, who was a reclamation project, and then they re-signed Matt Milano, who was a draftee, and they got Trey White done before, early. They got Deion Dawkins done early. So that stuff matters. Like players notice who you pay, when you pay them, and stuff like that. And that, that's part of the reason that good teams get good and bad teams stay bad. And, I think about all those drought years where we just let good players walk all the time and they leave saying all these kind of nasty things about the team and the GM. And, the intangibles matter, I think, more than people. That, like I said, I'm someone who sometimes, overlooks intangibles for data points and stuff like that. But I think that stuff matters so much, especially when you have a game as unique as football with so many different moving parts and stuff like that.
No, I agree. I think, again, I'm seeing it right now with Stefanski and Andrew Barry. You're seeing it with McDermott. We're even seeing it with some of the newer coaches, people coming in, with Flores and Saleh. And it does matter. Again, the Trey White, his development. Didn't they just extend one of the safeties? It might have been Micah Hyde.
Oh, yeah, Micah Hyde. They extended Micah Hyde. Yeah, they extended Micah Hyde.
Big part of their turnaround. That was like one of the first two guys McDermott got signed when he walked in the doors. I want two safeties. Everybody else can kind of hang on there. We're getting two safeties. And they were a big part of why they even made it to the playoffs that year. So it was kind of cool to see that turnaround. Now, I think some early on, I think there was some debate about the whole Tyrod Taylor thing. Should we keep him? Let him go. There was they benched him. They put in Nate Peterman. That didn't look good for everybody. And they were like, well, to be fair, we're trying to get higher draft picks. So it's like, I don't know, man. I got what they were doing there.
That 2017
for a long time now.
I think he's like and I don't think he could really go up much further after just because of who's in front of him. But he's like the 8th most tenured head coach now, which is wild. It's like this will be his fifth year. But just because of all the turnover, I think he's either going to be 8th or 12th longest tenured coach. He was in the same class as like Shanahan and those guys.
Not for long, man. It's the not for long league. But that's the benefit of having them for that long, right? Is you now have guys who've been a part of the system, learn, develop, and they buy in. And I love his wrestling background. I remember hearing his interviews about that and like that kind of how that's kind of played into a little bit of like his coaching mentality. I don't know if you caught this one, right? So I know one of the cooler things that I learned about team building from watching the presser from Brandon Beane was about the UDFAs, and that they felt like they wanted more picks later on in like the 6th and 5th round because they didn't know they were going to get like some of those guys. Because like, listen, they're a good team. Well, UDFAs aren't going to go to a good team because they're not making the team.
Well, there was that, and there was people who didn't know. There was talk his players could go back this year to college later, that there was a lighter market for UDFAs. And I was someone who wanted more draft picks anyways, because people say, well, 7 guys won't make the team, 8 guys won't make the team. But you get more swings, you get more bites at the apple. You're going to have better chances of hitting on a draft pick, even if it's a 5th, 6th, 7th rounder or stuff like that. So I love that. I thought that was, and you don't have to worry about, competing with other teams for players. So I was told I like that a lot.
I agree. I actually think that's something that I've been dealing with a lot as a Browns fan, because I've been hearing people sit there and say those kind of things recently where, 8 guys won't make the team. Well, it doesn't matter if 8 guys won't make the team. You now have competition in camp. You now have camp bodies. You have a 90-man roster all the way up until, all the way through training camp. So guys get injured. That was one of the things that Bean brought up. It's like, look, guys are going to get injured. We don't know who's going to be there at the end of August. So I thought, again, I loved his presser. I love watching these guys talk, especially these two. McDermott and Bean are two of the more fruitful GM head coaching combos as far as getting to listen to them talk. Like, I love Andrew Berry, and I do get some things from, like, I do love those guys as head coach and GM. You're not getting anything from them. It's Fort Knox. Andrew Berry ain't telling you anything. You'll be like, yo, is Baker getting extensions? Like, we're not talking about that. It's Fight Club here, folks. We don't talk about other people's contracts no more. This ain't Hugh Jackson and John Dorsey. It's like, that guy's going to get an extension. Although Haslam doesn't obey the rules. Haslam will give you insights because he's the owner and he can do whatever the hell he fucking wants. Listen, yes, of course Baker's getting an extension. What do you think? It's like, Haslam, shut up. It's like, Andrew, I signed your contracts. You know what? You're right. Never mind. I'm not telling the boss man to shut up. That's a good idea. Check you later, Jimmy. So
that's the nice thing about this Bills team is that nothing ever really leaks out of this team in terms, everything. It seems like whatever comes out is very measured. Like when Trey Wright got re-signed, like it was out for like an hour that he was that they were close to an extension, and like an hour later they had an extension. So that stuff worked out. But I'll tell you, I think you guys got the steal of the UDAFA market when you got Marvin Wilson. Because I had people I knew people who had like 4th round, 5th round grades on him.
I liked him a lot. And what it was coming off the injury.
Yeah.
If you watch some of his tape, he was coming off. They played a new scheme this year. The only person who played well at Florida State this year was Asante Samuel Jr. Let's be real. Yeah, listen, he's good, folks. He also has a dad who's played corner in the NFL, so he gets to learn from him. He don't need better coaching from the Florida State staff who's not good at coaching. So Marvin Wilson comes in. He's playing a new scheme. He's had a little bit of a knee problem going on. I heard a little bit of rumor about maybe he's got 2 knee problems, and that might be the thing that might have also pushed him a little bit further down. I know teams were – this was maybe the biggest year for, like, medical issues, like red flagging things. So there were a lot of guys who just constantly fell down and – there were some surprise steals at the end of the day, and at the end of the draft. Trey Smith, guy who like athletic, but again like major medical red flags as far. But again, Chiefs got him as a guard. Yeah. We barely got through the rest of the draft class, so I just wanted to quickly touch on some of the other guys. I know, because I wanted to touch on a couple of those guys, but then if we'll wrap up those names and then. Go just because again, like I think that pretty easily to talk about because it wasn't a ton of picks. They took Spencer Brown and Tommy Doyle, 2 tackles, 2 very tall, clear tackles, almost. Massive tackles. I love. There was someone who works at Buffalo Fanatics named Casey Reed, Cash Out BF on Twitter, who was on him for a while, and he's a guy like you talked about scouting small school prospects. You want to see him dominate. You want Spencer Brown, and man, he dominates. And he's a guy who's probably not quite ready, but the 2 Darrell Williams you can get out of his contract in a year, either via trade or being cut. And like Spencer Brown looks like someone who you put on a little bit more weight, you get a little more technically sound. Like I think that's great. And Tommy Brown is a great backup to have behind him once we move on from Darrell Williams. And once again, premium positions, they were best players available at premium positions, so you can't really be upset with that because if a tackle goes down, like we were one snap away from being in a really bad position at tackle, which you don't want, we talked about with offensive line play. You don't want that. No, you want high-end backups. And again, getting Spencer Brown, 3rd round, dude, and he was like a 99 percentile like athlete. So I think it was a very good pickup by then. Did I lose? Hello? Oh. I think I got you. Okay, good. I was losing you for a second. I'm like, oh no, the internet's gone now. No. Okay, it wasn't the internet. Good. No, because again, Spencer Brown, very athletic tackle. Kind of like Colton Miller. Think about like him. Like he went in the 1st round a couple years ago. I don't think he's that much lesser of a prospect than say Colton Miller was. I thought Spencer Brown was going to go a lot higher than this. So again, I think both the tackles that they got, they're addressing positions of need. Any of the day 3 guys that really sparked your fantasy? I know Marquez Stevenson, they mentioned him possibly as a returner. I like Stevenson a lot, mainly because so we have Isaiah McKenzie, who we brought back, who is competing for the returner spot, and I got dunked on by him earlier in the offseason. And if you dig through my Twitter, you'll probably find it, because I made a comment that we shouldn't re-sign Isaiah McKenzie because you can find similar, because he was a gadget guy who was efficient, but a gadget guy. So you could find similar production in a day 3 pick. And Marquez Stevenson was one of the guys I named, but it got people upset because Isaiah McKenzie's a very likable guy.
and someone snitch tagged him, and he got in my mentions and blew me up, and then he got signed the next day for like $1.5 million. Like you can't make it up. But I like him a lot just because speed, something this offense, pure speed guy, that's something this offense doesn't have, and Wildgoose was interesting because the Bills normally don't have speed at cornerback, and I think he's someone who didn't play a ton in college, and maybe has some upside. And Hamlin's gonna be the guy who's gonna step in and make the roster and be that third safety right away, which I think anytime you can find someone like that in that round is huge. And then Jake Anderson, if he can, once again, offensive line is important. If he can be a depth piece there at guard, awesome. I think they hit, it wasn't quite the draft we want. I know you asked for one. I gave you all of them.
No, I was trying to give you the softball pitch, and you hit it right out of the park. Thank you for that. Because I don't know. I don't know how deep somebody wants to go into everybody. Like this guy's barely going to make the roster. Why would I talk about it? And then you're just knocking it out of the park. Like, home run on this, Walter. You set me up quick. You said one. We're going all. Suck it. And I'm like, you know what? Fine. Yes, sir. You get your win there. You get it. You did a really good job. Because, again, I don't know if everybody knows all those names. And, again, Stevenson I really liked. Kind of, I think, different kind of slot guy than, if they are going to run him out of the slot, different than Cole Beasley. He's more of the, we're talking earlier about Austin Schwartz, kind of the guy who's going to be the deep ball kind of guy.
Yep. That's it. And I'll tell you, as we wrap up, I think I talked about you guys had probably the UDFA sign, and I think you guys getting JOK at 50 or whatever. What pick did you get him at?
We traded up to 52. We did a pick swap from the 3rd to the 4th round with the Carolina Panthers. It worked out.
I understand why he fell, because I think sometimes coaches have a hard time being imaginative with a player like that, and but I think getting a tweener at 52 like that is a lot different than getting a tweener at 24 or wherever you would have been picking. So I thought that was a steal. I think out of all the picks, that may end up being the steal of the draft. DK Metcalf as steal, just because people were like, we don't know how we're going to use him, but he's athletic freak.
The DK Metcalf thing, man, that was one of the weirdest steals ever. I'm like, that is still one I question to this day. It was clearly the medicals. That was clearly one of those things. I know people made a big deal about the 3-cone with DK Metcalf, but when a guy is 6'3" and runs a 4.3 40 and is built literally a stick of a wall, literally and also I love watching clips of him playing against press man coverage, because he just knocks him away. It's like, bitch, please, I'm going this way, and then he just goes at 6'3", he goes at 4.3, and it's like, this isn't fair. They're not supposed to make you. That's like Julio Jones. You're supposed to go in the 1st round. Who let the Seahawks get this guy?
And he just ran that 10-3 100 on the track.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just gonna go ahead and do some track athlete stuff, just on the fly. Gonna go do this. I'll see you guys later, dude. What the heck? Who developed this kid, and what kind of chamber? And then his dad was an NFL player. I'm like, okay, yeah. His dad was he was cloned, folks. He was cloned from his dad. And they took all the bad stuff out, and they just souped him up. They put Super Saiyan DNA in him, so maybe Superman even, we're gonna make him even better. And that was it. I know I'm alleging right now that he's a clone at this point. DK, I'm gonna somebody eventually, if they watch an hour of this episode, they're gonna be like, yo, at the end of his episode, he said DK Metcalf's a clone. I didn't know this was one of those kind of podcasts with aliens controlling the universe too, Walter. Dude, I appreciate it. I don't know if there's any other thoughts you have. I know you guys had a good free agency as well. I know you guys kind of lost John Brown, and he went over to the Raiders. Now you got Sanders. Overall, I think your team's in a good spot. It's got to be top 5, top 10 team this year.
Yeah, they brought back 21 of 22 players. I think the question is, did they do enough to get better? Mm-hmm. And I think ultimately the success of this team is going to come down to, do the people, their drafted players, take a step up? If Ed Oliver can take a step up, his draft, to 80% of what his draft status was, that's massive. If Dawson Knox can take a step up to what his freakish athletic potential is, that's massive. If Tremaine Edmonds can get closer to his ceiling, that's massive. So the Bills are banking on it. It's going to come down to, do the players on this team develop? We have Cordy Ford, who got in 2nd round 2 years ago. Can he develop? Can he be so that it's going to come down to developing the talent that we have, because all we really did was, at the end of the day, was add Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah, my biggest question with the Bills is the interior of the offensive line they didn't really spend resources on. Like, if I was going to sit there and, like, can you nitpick? I wasn't even as worried about corner because they even seemed to, like I said before, into the Nelson market. That news might come in all of a sudden at the end of this episode. All of a sudden, bam, like, Nelson did sign with the Bills. Like, it's one of those, like, flashback episode things at the end of the movie.
Well,
at the end of the day, he did sign.
That's why I really wanted, like, an interior lineman in this draft. That was the one thing that I was really pushing for. But, like, I think it sometimes informs you of what they think, and they probably think Cody Ford, who spent a year at tackle, wasn't good at tackle, but no one really billed him as a tackle coming out of college. Mm-hmm. And then he played a quarter of the year at guard this year before getting injured. You know, I think maybe with a year at guard, with a year at his right position, healthy, you know, that could be, you know, I'm not super high on Feliciano, but, you know, he's not, you can get by. Like, if there's any position you can really kind of get by on, you can get by if you have okay guards. So if Cody Ford takes a step up, I think that probably solves a lot of the issues that this line had.
Yeah, and they could still find, like, again, that's one of those positions you can stumble upon, or you can even trade for later on. You know, especially if Ford takes a step forward, I think you're right. They have something there then. They'll be set pretty well. Because even if you have one guard spot that's not great, it's not too big of an issue. You can cover up one not great thing as long as the other things are working really well. But I was still shocked about that whole offensive line thing. You know what they'll end up doing? We can't run the ball. We'll throw it 100 times in the first half anyway, like we did against the Ravens. Like, that was the amazing. It's like the only run they had was Josh Allen running the ball. It was just like we're not going to run it. Why would we run it? We have, like, Devin Singletary. I'm like, dude, Devin Singletary's not a bad running back, but we can't run block. It's like, oh. Yep.
Well, okay. And the funniest part of the season was when we played the Seahawks. I don't know if you ever saw this clip, but we opened the Seahawks against the Seahawks passing like 24 straight times. And Pete Carroll's comments after the game was, we were preparing for them to run the ball.
So there you go. There's your answer, right? We don't need to run the ball, sir. We've got people who can catch it. And then also, Josh Allen can run the ball. So it doesn't matter. They'll go back to the 4 wide receivers. Go ahead and stop us. Yep. That's it. Thank you, man. I really appreciate for you. I appreciate it.
This was a lot of fun.
Thanks. It really was. I'm so happy you came on. This was such a great show. Go ahead. Shout out anything, everything. The porn stars you like. Oh, I'm sorry, folks. This isn't a family show, but in case you've got family who might tune in, don't shout out the porn stars you like. But anything you want. You could shout out any podcast, anything you do.
If you 585 report, we drop every Saturday. BuffaloFanatics.com on YouTube. We have live shows Monday through Friday with different. I'm not on them, but we have great live shows. That sometimes I'm on them.
Good job, though. Yeah, I'm not on them. They don't let me on, but clearly you should be on, sir. I think you should absolutely be on those shows. They should start putting you in. I'm gonna be your agent. I'm like, yo, get this guy on some shows.
But we have great live shows during the week. So Buffalo Fanatics, check them out. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. I appreciate you having me on, man. It was a lot of fun. I always love talking football. I feel like Browns and Bills fans are kind of, we share a lake, and I think we share similar history. And I always made the joke, we're the kids in middle school that got made fun of, and now we're taking over the world. We're the CEOs of the world now.
So it's that glam up thing. It's like, this is what they were in high school. Now they're like, it's all it is, man. We got Baker, you guys got Allen. We got good offensive lines, good pass catchers. We're walking in, we got good defensive players. Maybe, we don't know. They got to develop. But still, we're walking in, you know what? Showing up in the AFC Championship this year. We show up, both teams. Let's do it. We're going to walk in, we're going to kick some booty. And no, but I will say this. I was rooting for you guys to make it into the playoffs that first year you got into the playoffs. I was watching that Andy Dalton Ravens game, and I was like every Bills fan out there doing the same thing. And I'm like, Andy, do it, Andy. You can do it. And he did it. After having a weird, bad season, he still beat the Ravens, kicked them out of the playoffs, got you guys in. Thank you for coming on, my friend. This was
absolutely great. Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. One of my
favorite interviews I've had so far. You guys, you can follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. death is in the end of life, and Punch, like that delicious drink you drink in the summer. Go follow everything this guy does. This was such a fun thing. If you like the Bills, if you don't like the Bills, still go follow him. Like, he's still a guy. He's still good. He clearly had a fun time on here. And, dude, thanks again for coming on.
Of course.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.